Well, we now have further proof that Blizzard is stalking me. Because after yesterday pointing out it was probably time to go back talking about the actual game, it turns out it is not to be done, because we have more news being pushed in the PTR, more changes to legendaries, more changes to abilities and spells, as well as some buffs and nerfs to the Venthyr Covenant in dungeons, as well as some more, I guess, tuning and possible speculation regarding Valor Points. So, let's go and take a look at all of the changes. A lot of these changes are going to be essentially Blizzard walking back on the previous buffs that they gave to the underrepresented and underperforming legendaries and Covenant abilities. As reported a few days ago, there was the first wave of buffs to many legendaries and to many Covenant abilities, and now Blizzard seems like they're stepping back a little bit on some of these changes. We're gonna go over them, and some of these are gonna be a little bit confusing due to, well, how weak they are. Why would they be nerfed? Possibly, of course, there is a scare of potential late game scaling of making an ability or a passive become way too strong later into the game. So let's start, and this time around we're not going alphabetically because alphabetically is boring and predictable, so we're just gonna go randomly, and we're gonna start with Monk. So Monk has gotten another buff to Juwen's Battle Gear. Juwen's Battle Gear, no surprise, is a bad legendary, unused legendary, and very weak. Part of the original round of buffs was that the Rising Sun Kick critical strike was reducing Fist of Fury cooldown by 5 seconds instead of 2.5 seconds, so it was doubled. The other part of the legendary was left alone and untouched, and now Blizzard is touching this part as well. Instead of the crit chance bonus after Fist of Fury being 30%, now it's gonna go up to 50%. So even more buffs. It's one of the few underperforming legendaries that has gotten another buff in this round of PTR changes. Then we have Rogue. We have Rogue because, yes, I mean, it's a little bit depressing. Assassination Rogue has gotten a buff. We have to call this a buff. Venomous Wounds is now going to give you 8 energy per proc instead of 7. Baby steps. I mean, as usual, another opportunity to point out that Assassination has other problems than these tiny little buffs, and they require a little bit more of a robust set of changes. 9.0.5, I'm aware, doesn't seem to be applying many changes to, talents and rebuilding an entire spec. It's more so changes to legendaries and Covenant abilities, so hoping for any sort of major sweeps of certain specializations that are underperforming is out of the question. So I guess this is what you have to take as an Assassination Rogue. Yeah, I'm gonna be the one to tell you, this is not gonna change anything. Assassination Rogue is still gonna be shit. This is not gonna help. Maybe in about a year, this is going to help though. So hold fast, my dear Assassination Rogue. It's not that you have anything else to do. You're still waiting for your energy anyways. So hang in there. Then we have Paladin. This is one of the many underrepresented legendaries which is going to get buffed and then nerfed, because the original buff to Shadowbreaker was buffing the mastery effect of Light of Dawn from 6 second duration to 10. I mentioned this being pretty handy because it was giving you more room to recast Light of Dawn to keep this buff up. You didn't need to have it done every 6 seconds, you could wait every 10, and then Blizzard toned it down to 8 seconds. So a middling way. Then we have the couple of changes regarding BM Hunter. We have Rylax Stalker's Piercing Fangs and we have Dark Command. So, well, they did the same thing again. Rylax Stalker started out as like 10% damage and then 15 and then 20 and then 40. After buffing it to 40, Blizzard said, no, let's go down to 35. So it's a minor, I guess, buff adjustment compared to what it was before. Dark Command is in the same situation. Dark Command was at 20% chance, then it was buffed to 35, and now it's been nerfed down to 30. It's this tiny little bit of fine-tuning regarding BM Hunter, which is very underplayed. I do believe it is more underplayed because of Marksmanship Hunter taking the spotlight, and less so being underplayed because it's bad. Like the Fellow spec in the Shadows Assassination. They have a worse problem than BM Hunter. I think BM Hunter are in a much better position to become stronger later into the expansion. Now, still, for Hunters, we have Flayed Shot. Flayed Shot was buffed across the board, because Flayed Shot in the first round of buffs got its AP, its attack power multiplier, so how much damage it does on the bleed, going from 87% of attack power to 112%, and then it also got the little bit added at the end, where the free kill shot that could proc off of this bleed was also doing 25% more damage. This was the first part of the buff, and now they are giving it another buff, which is the increased chance of actually proccing this free kill shot, going from 10% to 15%. So now you have a stronger bleed, which lasts for longer because it went from 14-second duration of the bleed to 18. So you have more chances to proc this free kill shot. And then you have more chances because it's not 10%, but it's 15% chance. And then when it does proc, it's also going to be doing 25% more damage. So Blizzard is trying to push a lot for this purely single target legendary for Hunter. I do like this legendary. I like how it works. I think it's pretty flavorful. Much cooler than Wild Spirits. Not to mention, at this point, it's a 30-second cooldown ability on an 18-second duration, the bleed. So very high uptime as well. Then we have to talk about Paladin. Paladin has gotten an interesting change to Final Verdict. Final Verdict was the thought of very powerful legendary for Red Paladin at the start because it had the obscene 50% chance to give you a free Hammer of Wrath and reset its cooldown, which was very powerful, and then it was nerfed down to 15% and it turned down to be like this. Obviously, very, very poor, unusable. Not only that, but this legendary has basically no effect in AoE because it only works with Templar's Verdict, not with Divine Storm, so basically useless in AoE. Now, with the buff is going to make its attack power scaling, the modifier, going from 194% to 223%. This is pretty strong, and it is stronger than it seems. You can say it's closer to a 15% buff. It seems weak, of course, because at first glance, especially if you don't speak, if you don't talk Retribution, you look at where Final Verdict is right now, and you're like, well, 15% stronger, that's shit. Well, it's not that the legendary is being made 15% stronger, it's the damage of Templar's Verdict, because this legendary replaces Templar's Verdict. Templar's Verdict for Red Paladin is this. You know, on pure single target, Templar's Verdict can easily go above 30% of your damage. Buffing 30% of your damage by 15% or close to 15% means 4 to 5 to 6% more damage done. Purely with this theory crafting, which is just feely crafting at this point, it would make it easily the second strongest legendary for Red Paladin in single target. Of course, this is all irrelevant because you can only use one legendary so far, and the Mad Paragon is heavily and clearly stronger than Final Verdict, and it also has better uses in AoE. So yes, it's a good buff. Yes, it makes Final Verdict much stronger. However, as long as you can only use one legendary, it's still not going to be, close to being usable when Mad Paragon is in the state it's in for Retribution. Even not just Retribution. That's how strong it is. Then, also, another change to Elemental Shaman. Elemental Shaman in the previous round of buffs got a slightly rebalancing around the damage profile. Lowered the damage on Lava Burst by 10%, but buffed the damage of Earthshock, and heavily buffed the damage of Earthquake. Now, to counteract the heavily increased damage of Earthquake for all of your builds, for all of your legendaries, Blizzard nerfed the Earthquake-specific legendary, which is Echoes of Great Sundering. The damage increase, the damage bonus after using Earthshock was 175%, and it was nerfed to 100, when the base damage of Earthquake was buffed by 70%. Now, it went up again a little bit, up to 120% additional damage. It's a good buff, of course, for Mythic Plus, but then again, we know that in Mythic Plus, Elemental Shaman is very, very underplayed compared to the rest of the specs, and by rest of the specs, I mean Fire Mage, Marksmanship Hunter, and Balanced Druid. So it definitely doesn't help. Still, I guess it's better than before. I guess it's better than having it at 100%, but still. Then we have a buff to Demonology Warlock. Out of the blue, Dreadstalkers is getting its attack power buffed by 10%, and the Dreadbite and Dreadlash abilities damage increased by 10%. Now, this is okay, I guess, when you consider that Cold Dreadstalkers is going to be doing barely 10 to 12% of your damage in single target, and not even 8% in AoE. So increasing this by 10% is going to be, 1% of your total damage increase at best. So it's pretty minor. Then you have Outlaw, which gets a buff to Concealed Blunderbuss, which is also irrelevant because Celerity is super strong as a legendary. Even if you could use two legendaries at the same time, you would still very likely not use this one. It's basically getting buffed from 2 to 3 additional times on your pistol shot, procced by Sinister Strike second hit, double hit. It's a cool buff and all, but it's just not strong enough right now. Then you have another one of these Blizzard back pedals with Katai Curio for Feral. Katai Curio used to generate 25% of your energy cost, then it was buffed to 35%, and now it's going to go down to 30%. Now, finishing with the round of buffs or nerfs, we have another one left at last for Hunter, because this is specific to a talent, not to an ability or to A legendary, this is Spitting Cobra. Spitting Cobra gets its damage increased by 260%. Yes, not 2.6%, not even 26%, actually 260%. This is because Spitting Cobra looks like this. When you look in a single target, it is roughly going to be doing between 3 to 5 less times the damage of the other talents in the row, particularly Thrill of the Hunt. And then in AoE, it gets even worse. So it's a very, very unused talent, which Blizzard tried to change coming into Shadowlands, making Bestial Wrath summon a Spitting Cobra at the end of Bestial Wrath, and each time you use Cobra Shot during Bestial Wrath, you would increase the damage of Spitting Cobra, but no. Beastmaster Hunter said no, thank you. I'm gonna be doing just fine without this. So Blizzard now is trying to buff it severely to see if something changes. I still think the answer is no. I still think Thrill of the Hunt is just too good. Using triple Barb Shot, basically keeping up Barb Shot, giving you 9% critical strike chance is just too good. The scaling, the stat scaling at the start and at the mid of the expansion, getting stats is super powerful because you don't have many of. So for now, I don't think it's gonna match up to Thrill of the Hunt. Maybe in about a year, when you have 57% unbuffed crit, Thrill of the Hunt is gonna be losing value. But for now, I don't see it losing any value. Now, looking away a little bit from the straight up spec and class changes and looking at the more encompassing changes, particularly regarding Covenants, because we have a Venthyr change. Venthyr is getting its effect, its buffs that you can get in dungeons changed in both dungeons, Sanguine Depths and Halls of Atonement. Now, in Halls of Atonement, you're like, well, Halls of Atonement is a joke anyways, so whatever. So the change for Halls of Atonement is that your Loyal Stoneborn, of course, for the non-Venthyr users, but you should have seen this in Halls of Atonement groups already, Venthyr users can essentially control the Loyal Stoneborns around the dungeon. So when you control them, not only you get to have them part of your group doing damage, which is actually very high damage, but also gives you a 10% damage reduction buff to your whole group. So what happens is that now controlling the Stoneborn is going to last for 45 seconds instead of 30, which is pretty good. It's a 50% increase, so very good. And then, of course, obviously, the Stoneborn boon, which is the 10% damage reduction, also gets increased from 30 seconds to 45, since it lasts as long as the actual Stoneborn is around you, so it's okay. Now, what is the actual counterbalance for that? The counterbalance for that is that the Guardian is doing much less damage, roughly 50% less damage than it was doing before. So you're losing burst damage, you're losing the strong ability to pick up a Stoneborn right before the first and second boss and the third boss. Essentially every time you have the ability to pick up one, except for the very last boss, and burst for a lot of damage. This is going to be a net nerf overall, even if you count in the longer duration of the 10% damage reduction buff. The loss of the burst damage offered by the Stoneborn is pretty heavy, so it's an overall nerf. The overall buff is going to come in Sanguine Depths. So, at first glance, you should be happy that Halls of Atonement gets a little bit nerfed, which is easy as a dungeon, and then Sanguine Depths gets buffed, which is also hard as a dungeon, so seems logical up to this point. The buff in Sanguine Depths is that the Anima Drain, which is when you enable the urns on the ground for you to kill mobs inside the area and gain the buff, is going to go from 45 to 60 seconds, so you have more time to pull more packs and make them die inside the urn zone for the buffs. And then when you actually get the buffs are going to increase in duration from 60 seconds to 75 seconds. So the buff, of course, is that you get damage and healing 5% per stack, up to 50% more damage and healing. In Sanguine Depths, you now have more options, more route options for you to stack up a much bigger pool of stacks of this Venthyr buff, because, of course, having more time to pick them all up from 45 to 60 seconds and then make it last longer, 75 seconds. So it is going to give more options for your Sanguine Depth runs, and of course, it is going to give more value to the Sanguine Depth Venthyr players being picked up for the dungeon. The only other change, Covenant related, is going to be to Fleshcraft. We pointed out already, we covered how much of a buff Fleshcraft received in the previous round of the PTR changes, going from a 20% shield to a 40% max HP shield, no longer needing you to actually being close to an elite, a special enemy to get a bigger shield. The fact that now the channel lasts for 3 seconds instead of 4, and now also having a built-in passive walking near enemy corpses reduces the cooldown of Fleshcraft by 1 second, making it much better for Mythic Plus. Of course, the big change was the 30% damage reduction when channeling. This was very powerful for several mechanics that you can use this to survive. Especially, I pointed out, since the strongest and most popular users of Necrolord are Shaman, Priest, and Death Knight, which all have no immunities, and specifically Shaman and Priest are rather squishy, particularly in Mythic Plus at high keys, and even raid mechanics, where they are sort of at the mechanic's mercy. They can only use their own DR and then they are just there, hoping to stay alive. This was helping them a lot. Well, the DR is getting nerfed from 30% to 20%. I still think it's just fine. The ability in and of itself is now much stronger, much more competitive, which is what I was asking when you compare this with things like the Vial of Serenity for Kyrian or even Soul Shape, the Blink for Nightfey. So I still think it's a just fine ability, utility ability for Necrolord. So these were all the changes so far of the new build, the new PTR build, 37705. The other thing we could talk about is Valor Points. This is going to create discussion either way, really. So in the new iteration of the PTR, you now have the upgraded, updated Dungeon Journal, when you can hover over the loot in base Mythic and see the start of the upgrade system. What is still interesting is that in the spell data of the PTR, we still have 14 ranks of upgrades. In-game, of course, it's going to show 12. Rank 12 is, of course, 220 item level, which is where Blizzard has announced it would stop. Once you achieve Shadowlands Keystone Master Season 1, you can get to the 216 and then 220 upgrade levels. However, we still have the rank 13 and 223 item level and the rank 14 226 item level available. So, could this be Blizzard still thinking about the possibility, maybe, of adding something like Mythic plus 18 or Mythic plus 20 as the next breakpoint for you to increase your item level on your Mythic plus gear? Or is it simply the logical follow-up for Season 2? You know, 9.1, the next season, the next raid tier, this is going to continue as a system, we think, right? Valor Points are not going to disappear just after this tier, so maybe this is just going to be the normal continuation. 226 item level is going to be normal raid difficulty of next tier. Maybe that's where Valor is going to start from. The loot from Mythic Plus is going to start from, so that's why it was added in the game. Or maybe they're actually thinking about extending the possible loot from Mythic Plus. As we have seen the upgrades in the PTR, although we don't have the actual numbers yet, we do know that the chunks of Valor costs from the vendor are 250, 500, 750, 1000 Valor, and it is very likely that the Valor points are going to be depending on the type of armor. As it is obvious, and it has been obvious for multiple other vendors throughout this game, two-handed weapons are costing more than one-handed weapons, and one-handed weapons cost more than chests, and chests cost more than bracers. In the current system, a piece of gear upgraded to the max item level is going to take a long time. Even if you get it at the highest possible item level, which is Mythic plus 15, 210, it would still take you something like a month to get, for example, a one-handed weapon from 210 to 220. So if you are, for example, a raider and you see the news, Mythic plus players can now get 226 item level gear, and you're like, what the fuck? I had to kill Mythic Sludge Fist to get these shoulder pads, and now someone can just go and do Mists of Tirna Seed plus 18 and get a 226 piece. That's insane. Well, with this current speed of Valor generation, Valor acquisition, it would take you a month and a half to actually be able to upgrade the weapon you looted, the 210 weapon you looted, all the way up to 226. Maybe week 1 of the new system you loot a 210 weapon, and then week 2 you loot a 210 chest piece. It's gonna take you a month and a half to get the weapon to 226 and a month to get the chest to 226. So yes, you could theoretically get 226 from Mythic Plus, but it would be very slow. One of the biggest complaints of people who never wanted Mythic Plus gear to equal raid gear is Mythic Plus is endlessly replayable. You cannot give Mythic Plus players 226 gear because then they can just spam the easiest dungeons, you know, the Mists of Tirna Seed, the Halls of Atonement, the Spires of Ascension on Tyrannical, or Theater of Pain on Fortify, something like that, and spam them and just get a bunch of gear at 226. It's ridiculous. It's overpowered. This system, the prices, the cost of Valor Point in this system seems designed in a way that could almost precede the possibility of 226 item level gear being available, simply because of how long it takes to upgrade your gear. It would make sense to be able to upgrade gear so high in item level, but at the cost of taking longer. So I think there is the possibility that Blizzard eventually is going to cave in and allow you to get 226 gear from Mythic Plus. At which point, it would lead me to close this video with the question, would you rather, given the example of this timeline, would you rather have a system where the costs of Valor Points are much faster? For example, just 1 week to upgrade most gear from 210 to 220 and then 2 weeks to upgrade the bigger pieces, so weapons, shoulders, chests, helmets, but they all cap at 220, or the current system that we have updated up to 226. So 1 month and a half to get a weapon to 226, 1 month to get a pair of pants to 226, 2 months to get a two-handed weapon to 226. However, you do have the option to get it to 226, which you wouldn't have otherwise, but it would just take you longer. So shorter time to wait to get 220 or longer time to wait to get to 226. That would be the question, the debate. So I'm gonna leave you with this. Be civil, please, in the comments, or not. I really don't care. Just tear yourself up. I don't give a shit. See you guys tomorrow. This time we probably should talk about the game again. If Blizzard doesn't backstab me with one of these changes to the PTR. So, see you guys tomorrow. And in the meantime, Blizzard, please, no more sneaky changes for today. Thanks.